My name is Archer Vick, and today I'm going to be talking with Mr. Harris, Dr. Harris. And Dr. Harris, would you go ahead and give us your full name?
Albert Neal Harris,
All right.
DDS.
And what's your current address? What was your date of birth?
10 June 24. That's 1924.
And you are a veteran of what war?
World War II, and I was called back in the Korean War, but when they assessed me, they found out that I was teaching at the dental school at Emory, and so they released me and I went back to teaching.
Okay. Okay.
I go every other war.
And what branch of service were you in?
It was the Army Air Corps when I joined right after Pearl Harbor, but it turned later, and now it's the Air Corps instead of, the Air Force instead of Air Corps.
Today is July the 16th, 2003, and we're going to talk with Dr. Harris today, and we're going to find out a little bit more about his experiences in World War II. And basically, I'd like to go ahead and let you start from the beginning, and just talk to me.
Well, when I got back from the prison camp where I was, when I got back to the United States, I called my folks from Virginia, where I landed in that Liberty boat. And that was the first time they found out that I was alive, because I had been reported missing in action and was captured and spent the last part of the war as a POW. But they never knew I was alive until I got back. Is that what you're relating? After I got back, I forgot about all the things that had happened to me. Everybody had a story. I got back, went back to school, and I started thinking that I was going to change from pharmacy as my primary target to dentistry, which is what I did. And I started by I had no car, so I hitchhiked to Atlanta and applied to go to dental school. They said, yes, we'll take your name. We have a list of about 2,100 waiting for a class of 120, and we'll see what happens. And so when they told me that, I had no car, and I started hitchhiking back and forth up here to the dental school several times. And finally, I'm sitting out in the class in the reception room, and the dean walked by, and he recognized me, and he says, "Neal, come in my office." And I thought, well, he's going to call the police. He just said, "Sit down, and if you'll promise to quit coming up here, we're going to accept you in this class." And that's how I got in the dental school.
Okay. Can you tell me, when did you first enlist into the military?
The day after Pearl Harbor.
Okay. And what do you remember about that?
I was at a high school buddy's house, and we heard about Pearl Harbor, and I just got, I don't know, I was just stunned like everybody else, I guess. And the next day, I was in a ROTC reserve type of unit, no active duty, of course. And I was at that stage, I was 17, I guess.
You were 17?
And born in 24. That's about right, isn't it? Yeah. So.
Is that something you were afraid to do?
No. I was afraid one time. I love this answer to that question. I was afraid one time, and that's when I got in the service, and I stayed scared the whole time. And anybody who says they weren't lying. But anyway, I was able to join the Air Force or the Air Corps the next day.
Tell me a little bit about basic training. Do you remember that?
I went to basic training and in the regular Army outfit that I was in, but waiting to be going into the Cadet Corps. And I had to wait my turn. That took several months. Finally, I got in the Cadet Corps. Anyway, it wound up that I soloed in 43, and I got my wings in April of 1944. I got my silver wings in 44, and single engine, and then I was assigned to the P-40, the first fighter that I flew. Incidentally, they had no twin-seat 40s the first time you got in the 40. It was the first time you flew it. And I loved it. And continued to fly the P-40. And
what was it like to fly one?
very powerful and very, you're the only one aboard, and you had control, and I liked that. And you had a lot of power. But of course, you didn't have the advantage of any instruction except local land instruction. Anyway, after I went to the unit in Fort Myers, Florida, I was sent overseas, and I joined the 479th Fighter Group, and my CO was Colonel Zemke, and he was a famous fighter pilot. And my squadron commander was Robin Olds, who later became commanding officer of the Air Force Cadet Academy, and who wound up like I did as a prisoner of war, but that was later. And does that answer the question?
Yes, sir. Do you remember arriving in England?
Yes.
Tell me about that. The first day.
We were on that one of those Liberty boats. No, I'm sorry, that was coming back. We were on the Ile-de-France, which was the third largest boat in the ocean at that time, and it was an amazing cruise. I was awed by the boat. We landed in Scotland, and finally got on a train and wound up down in Wattisham, England, and I joined the 479th Fighter Group, and it was the base for the RAF, primarily a base for the RAF we were assigned to, and it was well done.
Were you proud to be a part of that?
I was absolutely tickled to death.
Was it, is it something that, was that a dream for you to be a pilot?
Yes, it always had been, way before the war.
Where did you get the interest?
I don't know. I can't really identify that. That's a good question.
When you were there, and the first week or so that you were there in England, what time of year was it? Was it winter?
It was summer '44.
Okay. And I imagine it's pretty hot.
Yeah.
At that point during your career there, tell me a little bit about your missions. Tell me a little bit about the people you flew with.
Well, Colonel Zemke was the commander, and was one of the leading aces. Robin Olds, who was my squadron commander. There were four squadrons in a group. A group is the outfit. It's the 479th Group, and my squadron was the 434th Fighter Squadron, commanded by Robin Olds, who later became the CO of the Air Force Academy. And he was also a prisoner of war, as I was, and I was on his wing the day I went down. But I saw him later. It was not in combat. It was later after the war.
Did you have a best friend at that time?
Yes, and I don't recall his name, but I do know what you're referring to, and I think that I identified my best friend at the time, my flight leader. And his name was, I cannot say it, but anyway, he was the one who I looked up to and followed. And as a matter of fact, as the wingman and then as I graduated to the flight leader, I protected him. And of course, he led me and I protected him.
Sure.
That's what it amounted to.
So you gained the relationships you had that were pretty close.
Personal. Yes,
Personal.
yes. I mean, it was, I remember when I had a phone call about 6 months ago here from the guy that was on my wing when I went down. We were in a dogfight over Berlin, near Berlin. And I would firewall the engine, that Merlin Rolls-Royce engine, and it quit. There I am making a dive on a German fighter, and the engine blew, and it just quit. And all of a sudden, there I am in that sky by myself. And it didn't really dawn on me at the time about what I was and where I was, as much as trying to get the airplane under control and to save my life. My wingmen followed me down, and with no engine, you only have one chance to find a place to land, and that's a plowed field.
Did you have communications
I had,
between your
yes.
wingman?
Uh-huh.
And who was your wingman?
His name I had written here.
That's okay.
It's all right, I haven't, and he called me about several months ago. And his last words with me well, first of all, I found a field to land, which was a plowed field next to some woods. And I happened to find one, and you get one shot at that landing at that field. And I happened to do right and made the landing real easy. It made it perfectly. And I skidded to a stop, and the last words I said were, the last words I heard, rather, over the radio was from this wingman who was following me. See you after the war. And I jumped out of the airplane and ran into the woods. We were told beforehand to have something white to identify for surrender, which I did have a scarf. And I had my .45 in my holster. And I got out of the airplane with that and ran into the woods. And all of a sudden I heard this rattling effect of shell casings falling through the woods of my airplanes I was leading, strafing my airplane, which was the thing to do, so that the Germans could not use it.
Do you remember looking back and seeing your plane?
Not really. I looked up and I saw him pass over. And I remember this, though, and I've used this phrase very much. I was scared just one time. And that's when I got there, and I stayed scared the whole time, believe me.
What time of day was it?
It was early afternoon.
Was it hot or cold?
It was cold.
Was it raining?
But it was chilly. It wasn't freezing or anything like
What
that.
time of year was it? Do you remember?
Early in 45.
Okay. So could have been maybe fall?
There was snow on the ground, but it was something that I could deal with because I had my long underwear on underneath my flying outfit and my leather jacket, and I kept all that stuff with me.
So after the point, you had gone into the woods, and you could hear the shell casings from your buddies destroying your plane. What happened after that?
As I say, the thing that I remember about that most was the silence that I didn't hear, of my airplanes leaving, and I knew I was alone. And I was in the middle of that area and didn't have anybody to turn to. And I knew that if anybody saw me, it would be bad. So I started hiding. I was in the woods, which is where I had landed, next to the woods.
Did you have any idea where you were located?
Oh yeah, I knew where I was.
You were near Berlin. Where were you?
Between Berlin and the town where I was landed. I can't say the name of it right.
By chance, was it north or south?
It was southwest of Berlin.
Southwest, okay. And just a guess, how many miles could it have been?
I don't know, 20, 30, something like
Okay,
that.
so it's fairly close. And
I'm guessing at that mileage. I'm a map freak, but I don't have one in front of me.
that's just fine. Go right ahead with your story, sir.
Anyway, I knew that anybody who saw me was the wrong thing, and the next thing that I recall was hearing those shell casings from our airplanes falling through the woods where I was, because they were strafing the airplane that I had just gotten out of. And the airplane was named Little Droopy. It's Lil Droopy.
Right.
People kept asking me how I got that name. And that's another story, and I won't go into that, but
Okay.
it's obviously a funny one.
So what happened next?
Well, it got real quiet, and all of a sudden I realized I'm alone. This is an interesting story, believe me. In a white scarf around my neck, all fighter pilots had to keep from chafing our neck as we looked around to see where we were and the other fighters. In the scarf of that the hem of that scarf, rather, was a little compass, which was my answer to where I was and where I'm going. And that's an interesting story, and I'm going to tell part of the story. It's in this frame right here. And the Germans never found that compass. And the reason they didn't find it was because I took it out of the scarf that I had on, the hem of the scarf, and put it in the lower part of my digestive tract. And the Germans never found it. And that's the compass.
Okay. There's a compass right there.
Anyway, I think it was about 2 days later. Oh, did I mention the fact about the scarf?
About the compass. Was in the scarf.
Okay, now, by that time, my wingmen and my flight were strafing my airplane,
Yes, sir.
and I was out of sight and had no problem there. I mean, I was not being hit. Anyway, I was surrounded later, 2 days later, by Germans, and I knew it. And I had a .45, but I wasn't about to get into it. I was scared.
What was the first time that you had seen or that you knew that Germans were around?
Well, I saw them from time to time as I was hiding. And I would.
How close were they?
Some of them would get real close, maybe 15 or 20 yards away on a road, and I'm below some hedges or whatever.
Did you hear them talking?
Yeah,
Were you scared?
only once, and that's when I got there and I stayed scared, and that's no kidding. I mean, that's not a funny joke. I was scared as hell, really. Pardon the language, but that's the truth.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, finally I knew I was surrounded, and I did not want them to kill me. I mean, I was scared. But I did remember the rules that they had told me to try to give yourself up, if you have to an older soldier rather than a civilian. And in this group of people, I saw an old man who was a German soldier. And I came out of the hiding place and surrendered.
What did he do?
He turned around and he said, "You're in German." I don't remember. I don't know what he said, but it wasn't that bad.
Was he astonished? Was he surprised?
No, he was surprised, but I shocked him, but I mean, he was looking for me.
Right. So he's like.
I opened my flying jacket and reached in there with my hand and gently pulled out that .45 and handed it to him, and pointed to my insignia as a ranking officer. And that was it. I was a prisoner.
What at that point in time? What went through your mind?
this sounds really ludicrous and all, but it's true. Anybody who says they weren't scared is lying. I mean, I was absolutely petrified, but I did have some relief knowing that I was in their custody instead of them chasing me with guns. It was a relief to be captured or to be surrendered and know that they're not going to shoot me, or at least I didn't think they were at that time. Then what happened was they took me to this little farmhouse, I guess it was, out in that isolated area, and put me in the basement of this little house or cabin or whatever it was. And in that place there were two other men, and I was too scared to speak to them. They were American soldiers or airmen or something. And I didn't say anything to them, but during this period of time, I think it was maybe over a 2-day period, and in maybe the second day, 5 German soldiers came in the room where we were in this basement. They got in an argument.
They being the Germans?
They,
with one another?
With an argument. They were discussing something, and all of a sudden, they got both the other two and me put us up against the wall of this basement, and stood back on the other side of the room, and I heard those rifle bolts click. And I remember thinking, I hope my mother finds out what happened to me. And the bottom line is what they got in an argument about, everything got real quiet, and I heard those rifle bolts click, and a calm came over me, a complete calm. They fired into the wall next to my head. And instead of killing me, they beat the hell out of me. It's a wonder I have eyes or teeth. This arm was broken, and I was bloody and just mashed up.
How old would you say the German gentlemen, or they weren't gentlemen, but these soldiers?
They were just soldiers. I don't really know.
Okay.
They weren't old.
Were they bigger than you?
Oh yeah. Well, about my size, I guess, but I don't really know.
Okay.
All I could think of was monster.
Right.
And those other 2 men had the same thing happen to them, and of course I never spoke to them. I didn't know who they were or anything about them. After I came to, they drugged me out and put me on a train. Kind of
How far was the train from where
I don't know.
Were you blindfolded?
No. But I was not able to walk by myself. They put me on this train, and the train started moving. And there was a German guard in this freight train type of a coach there.
Were you in pain?
Oh God, yes.
What was hurting?
Everything. My ribs were broken. This arm was broken. It's a wonder I have eyes or teeth, as I said before. But
They didn't give you any medical attention?
not that I recall. No, I mean, you know, you'd think maybe an aspirin or something. I did have a cloth, and I did use my towel and so forth. And I was conscious. But like an idiot, and the train started moving, there was nobody watching me, and I jumped off that train down an embankment, down a grassy knoll, off the train. They stopped and caught me again and put me back on the train. And then we went to our first prison camp. Let me just say that there were more. We were on one of those so-called, quote, death marches, which was in fact true. From Nuremberg down to Moosburg, where I wound up as my last prison camp. This is in southern Germany, just above big city in South Georgia. South Germany.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, we got strafed by our own airplanes.
Now, when you say we got strafed, were you at that time?
We were marching in our own unit.
So you were on the ground. You weren't on a train.
We were on the ground at this time, and the Germans were with us. We had been told not to break rank and to wave something white. And I had that white scarf, and all of us who did waved the white scarf, and our fighters made a pass at us but didn't shoot. and saved our life, of course, by telling them who we were. They figured we were prisoners, and we were.
But they had already been strafed. You were strafed one time.
Well, I wasn't, but they were strafing around us.
Okay.
Anyway, they found us and didn't strafe.
Did they tip the wing?
Yeah. When they passed over, they did this. I remember that. That's an interesting question, and that's the answer.
So
But they didn't.
The pilot would have been able to see you guys.
There were, I think, either 7 or 8 P-51s, and they left.
Can you remember seeing that now? Do you remember seeing?
Yes, let me just say that after the war, everybody came home, had a story to tell, and I went back to school, got it back off, tried to forget about it. And I'm going to tell you how this came back into my thoughts. Okay, after that German prison camp firing squad, so forth and so on, we were liberated by George Patton. By the way, I opened the gate for him when he came in our place down in Mooseburg at Stalag 7, I think it was. I weighed 116 or so pounds. Walked down the road with George Patton, and you know what I remember about him? 2 things. First of all, he had just gotten his 4th star, and there must have been 8,000 stars on him and his uniform and his Jeep. He was sitting in the back of that Jeep, and every word he said was a cuss word. And I applauded that in my mind. I believed him. But anyway, they flew us back out in that, and I remember flying over France, and we passed by Paris, and the pilot actually buzzed the Eiffel Tower and wagged his wings at the Eiffel Tower, and we went back out to Fécamp, France, to the coast. We were put in one of these waiting places to get on a Liberty boat. And while we were waiting, we had the buddy system, and my buddy, that means one of us was awake at all times. There were 2 together. We were pairs. Everybody had a buddy. One of us was awake while the other one slept, whenever that was. Anyway, he was from New Orleans, and he knew where there was a monastery where they were making some kind of champagne or something down on the coast of France. He said, let's go down there. We went down there and talked one of the monks out of a bottle of that champagne. We knew if we took it back, we'd have to share it. So we sat down on the edge of that beach and drank that champagne. And you talking about sick. I still remember how sick that stuff made me. Anyway, we got on the Liberty boat to come home. We got back on in the water, and I'm asleep in my bunk on that Liberty boat. It was so packed with former prisoners that we slept in shifts. And my shift of sleep came up, and I was in my booth, and all of a sudden I felt this warm body next to me, cuddling up with me, and I thought, oh no. It had been a long time, but not that long. I turned to him, and I remember saying some words that I wouldn't repeat here. Get away from me or you're dead. Anyway, got rid of him.
Tell me, sir, a little bit about, more about, at that point in time, you guys were in a moving prisoner of war?
No. We were in the last stalag where I was liberated.
What was it like there?
Well, it was well organized, but we had no food. The Germans had no food to give us.
It was pretty dirty?
I was looked after pretty well by this older guard that I told you about. And it was dirty because it wasn't like the old German outfit that you would have expected to see.
You remember the name of that German
No.
that helped you?
No, I don't.
Why would he help you?
He was just old, and he didn't want to. I guess they knew they were losing.
And how did he help you?
Well, he would give me water and look after me and help me to get to the bathroom. And we didn't call it the bathroom at that time, but that's what it was. And I didn't have anything to deliver to the bathroom much because I had no food. I told you how little I weighed.
How long were you in prison?
Just the last 3 months. And the essence of the stay was carried on after the war because we didn't get food immediately. And we were, all I could think about, I forgot about girls and all that. I forgot about everything except peanut butter, which what I mentioned. And I think they weighed me in, what did I say, 106 or 7 pounds when they weighed me. Anyway, later after the French stay for a while, they put me on a Liberty boat, got back to the United States. We landed in Virginia, and I called home, and that was a touching thing because that was the first time they knew I was alive. They had gotten this telegram from the Air Corps. It was Corps at the time, not Force. It says missing in action. I have that telegram in my keeper here. That's a touching thing. I have it here. But I want to mention this too. Before I got out of prison, I had the opportunity to go into their headquarters and get their records of me. These are those records with my picture on them. And if I look scared, it's accurate. Now, the most interesting thing that I have to say is coming up. Let me just say that I got home, went back to school. After I called them, went back to school. My son now joined Delta Airlines, which I helped do because after I finished dental school, started my own practice after teaching at Emory. I was very honored after I sold my last airplane after my private teaching sessions on my own time. Anyway, this guy who came to me as a patient, and we started talking, and I realized that I'm talking to the guy who was the son of the man that was in that prison camp before the firing squad. I couldn't believe it. I called him, and we got to talking and identified each other by what we knew, not the names. We didn't know each other's name.
Now the firing squad
was in the basement of that building when I was a prisoner.
Wow.
And here I am talking to the man whose son I'm seeing as a patient. And I couldn't believe it. But we have a bond. We found the third man who he knew, and I had no idea, who lived in Idaho. Isn't that an amazing story?
Yes, sir.
Put together by two sons who wouldn't be here if we had been killed. We have a bond, as I say, and I'm in touch with them all the time.
Could you give us their names?
Ray Banks.
And the other one?
I can't recall his name, but I have it written down. I'm at that stage of the game now where I don't remember everything as much. In fact, I have to look at my card sometime to remember my name to be sure I get that straight, particularly if I'm in a charging somewhere. I used to use that as a joke, but it's getting more accurate.
When you came back, was it difficult after being in prison and being in war to come back to a civilian life?
Thank you for asking that question, because that has been asked many times. And let me just say that everybody had a story. I tried to put it behind me. I didn't even talk about it. To heck with that. I'm glad to be home. I started talking about what courses I was going to take, where I was going to live, what I was going to do, trying to get in touch with my relatives. And I went back to school and forgot about it. And when I graduated, as I mentioned before, the reason I stayed in Atlanta was because I had been asked to stay and teach, which was unheard of. When I was a junior in dental school, they asked me to stay and teach. There must have been a big shortage. But that's what happened, and that's how I became a faculty member, and then later in my own practice.
What was it like to be a fighter pilot in a dogfight?
I think I know what you mean. I think the word aggressive is the word that makes success of a fighter pilot. And the other word that it overshadows any of the others, scared. Anybody who says they weren't scared is a damn liar. That's how I am.
Do you remember any firefights?
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell us about one?
I was lucky not to have been shot down, but I was a pretty good pilot. And when I was following as a wingman, I was with the right guy who made the right turns. It was a matter of who got there first as far as fighter pilots are concerned. And our job was not attack as much as it was prevent, because we were escorting those B-24 bombers primarily.
When you were in the air, could you see your opponent, the enemy? Could you see the pilot?
The first thing that a fighter pilot learns is never stop looking. Look around all the time, everywhere, all the time. Keep your head moving. The ones you don't see is the one that's going to kill you. Those fighter pilots of Germany were the ones that I was looking for. I remember being attacked by one of our planes who misunderstood who I was, but he didn't hit me, thank God. But I saw him coming, and I turned into him. You always turn into your attacker.
What's the closest you think you ever came to actually being close to a German?
I got hit by shrapnel off of when we were on a strafing run. I got hit by ground fire, but it wasn't enough to ground me. The thing about an inline engine, I think I mentioned before, is that one little nick in that water coolant or liquid coolant, one little nick and you're dead. You're out of that engine, will go dead within just a minute or so. As opposed to the radial air-cooled engine of the P-47. Anyway, the P-51 that I was flying was a high altitude, used primarily as an escort, as opposed to this P-47 was used for the strafing ground attack. How much time?
Doing fine. Tell me a little bit about, did you have any men in your unit that lost their lives?
Oh, yes. Also, I've had 2 other reunions with other pilots who were, as I mentioned earlier, the wingman, who was the last one. I'll never forget those words when he said, "See you after the war." And you know who showed up about 2 weeks later? He did, as a prisoner. So I saw him before or after the war.
You saw him in prison?
Yes.
Do you remember saying anything to him?
No, we didn't ever get together, but I did see him. Now, the real other interesting thing to him is that about, several months ago, he called me from West Virginia, and he says, is this the Neal Harris that I flew with? And I said, who is this? And we got together on the phone. It touched my heart, really. Because, you don't expect that.
Could you give us his name? Do you remember?
I've got it written down.
That's fine. That's not
Believe me, we have a bond, and I do know his name. I can't say it.
Right.
But as say a wingman and his leader of an element, called an element leader, and his wingman had a bond like you would expect them to have.
If you've told me about several experiences, and are there any other experiences that you had, maybe while you were in prison, or maybe while you were flying?
Oh, I know one of them that is interesting. One day, the colonel in my air base in England called me in and says, tomorrow we're going to have the day off. We're going to be stood down, as we called it, and I want you to take that C-54 high-wing monoplane out there.
What kind
A
of
high-wing monoplane, a 5-passenger monoplane, one engine. Take it up to Scotland and pick up the party supplies. Now, what he meant was scotch. Well, I don't drink now and haven't for over 17 years, but I did at that time drink. Not when I was flying, but I did. Reminds me quickly, I'll tell you of the French drink that I had when I was liberated. I got so drunk I couldn't even stand up. But anyway, I took off in that airplane after the crew chief told me how to start it. Flew up to Scotland in that horrible weather, found the airport, landed, picked up that airplane full of booze, took off and flew back down to my airport in that damn horrible weather. Landed. We were unloading the airplane, and guess who drove up out of one of those two cars that drove up was my hero, Glenn Miller. Glenn Miller was really a wonderful guy. Although I didn't know him personally, I did speak to him. He might have spoken to me, but I was a trombone player in high school. Later played the trombone after the war, joined the Atlanta Symphony, I think I mentioned that. I had my own dance band here in Atlanta, playing the trombone. He got in my airplane, that C-54 Norseman, and I stood there and watched him take off into that horrible weather, and that was that. But it was quite a story. Now, after the war, I found out that he had died in that flight, in that airplane that I had just flown. I couldn't believe it, but it was documented by the same airplane and the same date. He was going to France to entertain the French troops who were in place there at the time. My concept of why he was lost and how he was lost is that he probably was hit by by the U.S. Air Force planes coming back who were jettisoning their unused bombs into the North Sea. You follow that?
Yes, sir.
Our bombs probably hit his plane. He was never discovered, never seen or heard from anymore. That was that.
He was the only one in the plane?
Yeah. Well, no, there was a pilot. I think there were two of them. But that, and I didn't know anything about that until after the war. I mean, so what? I mean, in fact, I didn't hear about it. But it really touched my heart when I did find out about it.
When you were in prison, can you tell me about an average day? Can you tell me what happened? Think of a day in your mind.
Well, at first it was where are we? I'll just try to be brief and accurate. Secondly, I think it was I'm hungry. The German food ration got less and less.
Where did you sleep?
We slept, first of all, I would say, again, we had a pair system. We had a buddy system. One of us was awake at all times. We would sleep wherever we could when we were on the march. And when we had shelter, we would swap times in the so-called bed or bunk or wherever we were. Sometimes we had a comfortable place and sometimes not.
Could you talk between one another?
Oh, yeah. In fact, that's how you chose him. I chose a guy who was another fighter pilot and who I trusted because I liked him.
Was he about your age?
Yeah. And obviously he wasn't too bright because he was a fighter pilot, but
What did you like about him?
his aggressiveness.
What was he aggressive about? What showed?
I don't like these SOBs, and I didn't either. But I didn't tell them that. We told each other, and we worked at each other, and we guarded each other. One of us, as I said, was awake to see what was happening and why we might be moved. See, at that point, we really never had a place that we could call home, so to speak. We were on the move.
And why do you think they were moving you so much?
Hell, because the Allies were approaching. It was toward the end of the war. Thank God I didn't have that much time in prison camp.
Right.
They were approaching, And that's when I was telling you about George Patton. He caught up with us down in Mooseburg. I mentioned that before.
Yes, sir. When you were in this traveling, or when you were in prison, were any of the inmates killed?
Yeah.
How were they killed?
Sometimes, one time, that, as I told you, they were strafed by our airplanes, but I didn't have a problem there. I had a problem, but I wasn't hit.
Did the Germans kill any prisoners?
I didn't see it, but I heard it. I don't know. But they did, yeah. When there were those that tried to escape, and they were shot. And I'm sure there were arguments and confrontations that caused it. But I was never present when one got hit.
Can you tell me a little bit, sir, about the knife?
Oh, my last thoughts during the last days were nothing but peanut butter. I'm not kidding. All I could think of, I forgot about girls, sex, all of that, and all I could think of was peanut butter. I was hungry, and I weighed, as I told you before, I weighed 106 pounds when they evaluated me in France. But during that period of time, I carved out of a piece of wood with a piece of glass this knife in case I ever had something to eat. And that was the...
How did you keep that knife?
I just had it in my pocket as a piece of wood.
Would they have kept...
I don't know how I got it back. It came home when I went through my debris. Here's an interesting thing. This is a New Testament that I carried through the war in my pocket.
Even when you were a prisoner?
Yep. This thing had a so-called bulletproof shield on it.
Okay.
We were told that was to protect us. And then in that there's some wording in that.
Would you like?
On the front page. But that's a very much of a personal keepsake.
It says to
Also,
Neal from Mother, with all my love, October 9th, 1944.
it's just when I went overseas. I told you about the compass.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, the other things that of interest. Oh, when I was liberated, a German guard, an older man, gave me this bayonet. Look at the swastika.
Where were you when he gave you?
In Mooseburg. He was an older man. The older men were more sympathetic with us and took care of us better.
The older soldiers?
Older Germans, yes.
And he gave you this when?
When after we were liberated, he surrendered that to me as a gesture. It's a personal thing that means something to me, you know.
Yes, sir.
I also had, this was in the stuff that was sent home after I was a prisoner, and I was still in MIA. I showed you, did I not show you the telegram that was received by
from
the family?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that is what we call a silver dollar. And what you did was, in those days when I was in combat, it was the thing to take your buddy to the bar and have a drink with him and have him sign that dollar bill. And there are a lot of big-time signatures on there of my group.
Why did they do that?
Just for the hell of it, for the fun of it. Robin Olds was the leader of my group, the squadron, when I went down. He later became the CEO of the
Would you like
Air
to
Force
read out
Academy.
some of those names?
Well, this was the Wattisham Silver Dollar, short snorter, as it was called. And some of the names in there, Huval, Haynes, who was my wingman,
Yeah.
who was the man who called me. This is a touching thing just to sit here and talk with you, believe me. Doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it touches my heart to know these people. And believe it or not, there were some people in there who were fighter pilots who actually had some sense. It wasn't a requirement to be a fighter pilot to have any sense at all. George Gleason was one of the leading aces. His name is on here.
Were any of those gentlemen killed in action?
I'm sure they were, but I don't know. It may be the ones that I don't recognize. I don't know.
How many names would you say are on there? Just
Probably 11 or 12. It's just something that turned up. Doesn't mean anything to anybody but me, but it touches my heart to see the occasion.
How long that dollar did?
This one came from 1944, and that's when all these names were signed.
When you were, did you have that with you when you were flying? And you were...
No, it was in the stuff that was sent back. This bill happened to be, I noticed here, first time I've seen it, it was printed in 35. That's 1935. Oh, here's an interesting hat that I like to wear sometimes, although if I chart my hair properly, I don't wear it. I don't comb it, I chart it, as she knows. There's an organization in Atlanta of old veterans, and I was really honored to be elected the commander of the round table in Atlanta, Georgia. And we still have a meeting every month, and we have a real bond. But to be commander of a group like that was quite an honor.
Yes, sir.
I have this hat, as I say, and it was just happened to show up. I told you about the compass and all that. This is
Tell us about the spoon.
the same time when I made occasionally we'd get a bowl of slop, and I carved this spoon out of a piece of wood with a piece of glass.
Did you eat with this?
When I could.
Where did you get the piece of wood? Or was it
Just off of the dang ground. I have no idea. But that is a personal keepsake that really touches me to have, too. It's like something like the compass that I told you about. The story in the newspaper was concerning when I was before the firing squad in the newspaper. I saved it. Oh, did I told you about the picture there that came out of the German fighter? When we were standing around waiting to be flown back to France.
Yes, sir.
That's an interesting story. There was an ME-109 there, which is a German fighter.
Yes, sir.
I took apart anyway, somewhere or another, I got some gun film out of his gun and kept it with me until about 4 or 5 years ago, and I had it rejuvenated through some kind of process. It was so crumbly and flickly that you couldn't even touch the film. It was negative film out of the gun.
Where did you get
Out of that gun, out of the gun camera of the P-50, no, the 109 German fighter.
And where was that plane when you got that?
On the airfield where I was waiting in Landshut to be flown back to France. I took it out of the German airplane. I kept it all those years and had it rejuvenated or redone or what do you call it, and developed, and it showed him shooting down a B-17. Isn't that amazing? That was gun film that I took out of a gun camera of a German fighter on the ground.
Wow.
Crazy. I'm glad it didn't show him shooting me down anyway.
Do you remember have you been to any more reunions since World War II?
Oh, yes. Did I mention the fact that we found the third guy
No, sir. Oh, the third guy, you did, yes.
before the firing squad?
Yes.
Now, I have talked to him. He's in bad shape, and he is not expected to live. He lives out in the West. I've never met him personally. I mean, never been with him long, but just met him. And anyway, but I am in touch with the other man all the time, as I told you earlier. Of all the bonds that I've ever heard of, or certainly ever experienced personally, that is the most, definitely the best bond I've ever experienced. Oh, I told you about Glenn Miller. Did you remember Robert Scott? One of the famous people I came in contact with he was with these in Asia. Did I show you the pictures of my group? That's not it, but there is one here. That's it. I'd like for you to see that. That's taken in England during the winter of '44, and my picture is in there. I'm on my knees down at the bottom, in the middle of the lower level of people there. Yeah, that's it.
Very nice.
This is a bunch of memorabilia. As you know, growing up in the Depression, I never threw anything away, and I saved all of this, and it came back to me when that reunion happened, and it's just been a real touching thing. In fact, it helped me cleanse all of these thoughts and stuff out of my heart and mind.
Since World War II.
Oh, here's another interesting. Pardon me. Paul Tibbets, you remember that name?
No, sir.
Paul Tibbets was a temporary patient for about 10 minutes in my office because I had met him. He was the pilot of the Enola Gay. That airplane was in Atlanta, and I went out to see him, and we got to talking, and we became friends, and I took him to the office. That's quite a name and quite an act that he was participated in. That's really something. You know, afterwards, we went out and started talking and telling and all that. And I had the obvious, usual question for him. Colonel, did you ever have any He said, wait just a minute, don't even ask me that question, Neal. I was given a job to do, and I did it. I'll never forget what he said to me about that answer. And I agreed with him. And my spontaneous answer was, I just wish you'd have gotten them all.
Sir, have you ever met a German?
Oh, yeah, I've had them as patients. I did properly anesthetize them, hoping that they wouldn't recover. Oh, I belong to the Combat Pilots Association. That's pretty much. Oh, this story, as I told you, I think, about the picture. Yeah.
Tell us about your awards, sir.
There's no nothing but what you see there. I have the air medal. I was not in combat that long, as you could tell. These are aerial gunfire. I mean aerial awards for the pistol. This is aerial. I mean, this is for the pistol and for the small bore and for the machine gun. Unit citation, good conduct. Air medal with a second air medal bonus. And this is European, so forth. Oh, the compass is the one in there that I told you about. Here it is. And these are various other decorations, but that's essentially it.
Did you have any confirmed kills?
On the ground, but not in. I had one in the air, I thought, but I'm not sure. It was never confirmed.
Do you want to tell us about the one in the ground?
Strafing was after a mission. If we on the way back, if we saw something on the ground, we would strafe it, and it was a very difficult thing for the P-51. First of all, we were the liquid-cooled engine, which was very subject to bad hits by the land fire, ground fire. That primarily was the mission of the P-47, which was the 9th Air Force, another division also in the 8th Air Force. Anyway, I strafed, and I've strafed.
What was your target?
I was going to say I've strafed a row of tanks and a row of trucks. Apparently, they were trucks. And I strafed an airfield, 2 or 3 airfields. Didn't have any claims because I was usually following somebody. And we left a lot of airfields toward the end of the war. It was just before I went down. We left a lot of airfields in bad shape, rubble.
Right.
And those 6 50 caliber guns in the 51. By the way, they would slow us down 15 or 20 to 30 miles an hour when we fired. Anyway.
Did you feel vibration?
Oh, yeah. Brrr.
How long would your ammunition last?
I've forgotten how many we had, but it wouldn't last more than a minute to a minute and a half total time.
Out of curiosity?
I think that's correct.
When you would go on a mission and you were on your way back, would you use all your ammunition, or would you always save it?
Sometimes we would find somebody on obvious enemy on the ground. We'd strafe, or something that we would hit and coming back over France on our way back to England.
Would you be worried that you would use all your ammunition and then fly back and then encounter an enemy?
That was always a thought, but toward the end of the war, pardon me, toward the end of the war, we didn't have that as much as they did earlier, because the Air Force, the Luftwaffe was just about done, and our primary enemy was the ground force, and we helped strafe a lot in that category. The other thing is ground fire was dangerous as it could be, because a rifle could nick one little bitty coolant valve in your airplane and you were done. So strafing was dangerous, but we did it.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about. It's really interesting to see you talk about how it felt to be in this P-51, and you said when you would strafe that you would actually the plane would slow down because of the
repercussion of the fire. Yes.
And was it exhilarating feeling, or were you still scared?
I think that it's a good question, but the answer varies. First of all, I used to say this, that, and the other. Then it came on me to say the real truth and say that I was only scared one time, and that was when I got there, and I stayed scared. And then the real truth again would be when I approached a firing back at me type of situation of ground troops or an airplane who I couldn't contact, outmaneuver. Anybody who says they weren't scared lying or crazy. I mean, I was scared, yeah.
How do you handle that fear?
You stay aggressive, attack, and take the consequences. It's a good question, and it came to my mind a long time after the war, but I realized during the war, I guess, only way to handle it was if you don't like it, attack. If you're scared, don't run, attack. Anybody, again, I'm going to say it, anybody who says they weren't scared is lying.
I guess over the period of time, too, you built some confidence, maybe?
Oh, well, no, I don't say it was confidence. It's just that I was a good pilot. As far as the maneuverability and ability to handle my airplane, yes, I had complete confidence that I could handle it.
Tell me a little bit.
As long as I had an engine.
We've got about two more minutes or so, but really, just I want to know. Tell me, since the wars happened and over your years, you've told me about that you've done some reunions. You told me that about how an impact it has been in your life. Tell me, World War II, has it made you a better person? Has it made you...
I will say this, that the reunion with that prisoner has brought a lot of time and thoughts to my heart, where everybody really lives. And I was able to purge a lot of thoughts in my mind that I had refused to answer and to address and to accept. You know, the word is acceptance. And I have had the disease of alcoholism, and I haven't had anything to drink in 17 years it is. And I get mad and I get ugly and I hit bad shots on the golf course, but I don't ever go cure it with a damn drink. So to talk it out and to talk to either your monitor or your buddy and to tell the truth and to get it out of your system is one of the best ways to purge your thoughts and to feel better.
How has it affected your immediate family?
The reunion has helped purge. As I said, I try to be a better person, first of all, for me. And that means that they are going to be treated better. I'm the one who matters to me because I'm the only one who can do anything really about me instead of looking for help.
How long was it before you first shared a lot of your experiences with your wife or your children?
She's dead, but my children and I are very close, thank God. And I have shared experiences when I had this reunion with my POW buddy. It started me with that ability to get it out.
Sir, it's been a pleasure and an honor.
It's an honor to be here.
And we appreciate your giving us your time, your experiences, and your service, sir. And again, we really appreciate you sharing this information.
What a nice, really, really nice group, this lady and you and the others that I've met. I'm serious. As I say again, at this stage, I don't lie about things like that anymore. I can't remember them if I tell them, so I don't tell them. But what I'm saying is true, and I appreciate being here.